Good evening. Welcome to the Toby Talkshow. Today we will be discussing what constitutes a good life with my own dad, who's a doctor. He's an anesthesiologist and a man I respect so much. He is my personal hero. All right, and here we go. All right. So, Dad, what do you think constitutes a good life? And let me come up with a question real quick. What do you, like, for example, what do you think, like, a acceptable work split between life is? Because I know that you worked during residency, like, absolutely absurd hours.
So, I would say that there's different ways to look at things. There's probably a way of looking at a sustainable work schedule of working a certain amount of hours almost indefinitely, until potentially retirement date. Or I think there's other times where you see the effort required maybe up front to put in longer hours and maybe just more effort in general. But doing that would give you the opportunity later on in life to maybe then set your own hours and ease off a little bit. And I would say there are certainly those people and those opportunities where people love what they're doing so much that even if they're putting in really long hours, it's not seen as a burden to them. It doesn't bother them because it's something that they find rewarding and enjoy doing. So I think there's a lot of variables here that you'd have to take into consideration of what you're considering reasonable and how you'd want to design your life.
So yeah, what I'm kind of hearing here, it's kind of what I thought originally. It's like your mileage may vary. Just it depends on the type of person who you are and what your goals are, if you're retired or not, and what you're trying to achieve.
Sure. You look at people like Elon Musk, who puts in obscene hours. He just literally lives to work and do his entrepreneurial type things. That's what drives him. And the money clearly comes to him, but it's been kind of irrespective of that. It doesn't matter to him. He's there for seeing the growth and seeing the development. So I think he's kind of an outlier, but there are those people where the satisfaction from just their accomplishments is what motivates them and drives them.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Say on the topic of that, I remember you mentioned in medical school, just the amount of crazy work that they would give you on top of, what is it called whenever you're like the rotations, I guess. Say did you ever really feel burnt out by school? Because you went through some 15 years of schooling.
I don't know that I felt burnt out at the time. It seems like things were fresh enough and changing enough that it seemed like if you didn't like something, you knew it was going to change at least within a certain time period. So everything's somewhat manageable. But yeah, the stress in general of just the collective pressure of succeeding or trying to even excel in that environment is pretty stressful. So I don't know if that contributes to burnout really at that early stage, but it's a lot of pressure to deal with on a day-to-day basis just from a stress point of view.
So it seems like, I remember you made the analogy of it's like high school where they're was all feeding you with a spoon, and then in college they're throwing a shovel on you of knowledge, and then in medical school they're straight up dump truck on you. Just
that
too
was
much
an analogy that
know.
was given to me, just the volume that you're expected to sift through and retain. But I think it was also pointed out that it's really almost impossible to master and hold all of that information for one person. So a lot of what they're trying to do is they're trying to help you develop a skill set by which you know how to process information, because the medical knowledge and just the knowledge in general grows on such an exponential basis that even if you fully had all of the information, memorized and had instant access in your head to it at the time of graduating, it would be rendered pretty useless and obsolete pretty quickly. So really you've got to learn a way of organizing information and a way to assess information, and a means by which too you can also go look up and access the latest treatment protocols, the latest research, and just stay current. So again, it's multifactorial. Having a knowledge base to draw from just on a day-to-day basis, but also having that ability to go promptly access information and then apply it.
So yeah, it's amazing ability of yours. I remember like you had that like that book about like the structure of the skull, and I just like randomly opened a page to it, and I was like, "What is this structure?" And then you recalled it word for word. I was just astounded. I was like, "What?" So yeah, on the topic of medical school too, did you ever like once you graduated medical school and or even your residency and you became a full-fledged doctor, do you ever feel like kind of not like you've peaked or whatever, but just like feel like there's not much left for you to achieve? Or
that's an interesting question. I mean, I think initially there's really such a sense of excitement to finally arrive, and you're at that. Well, and yeah, getting paid is fantastic, so that's great. So I think really initially there's that excitement of having arrived and being at the top of the mountain, so to speak. So I think most people, well, I'll speak for myself at least, you know, you want to enjoy that moment, you know, but there's also a pretty hefty degree of, I'll use the word apprehension, I guess, because as a resident and as an intern, you have an attending physician. You always have someone as backup. So you can act independent and tough, but you always know you can basically, you know, push the panic button and have someone come help you and assist you. And now you're at a point in your career, it's like, congratulations, you're it. You're now the top of the food chain or top of this pyramid, and you're not calling anyone else to come help you. You are that guy. Everyone calls you to come help. And that's a bit panic-inducing to think that, oh, shoot.
Oh, I'm sure that absolutely sounds panic-inducing. I mean, being responsible for someone's life and...
Yeah, that's kind of it. And you're like, man, I don't get to call for backup. I'm the guy people call when they need assistance. So that's a little unnerving for a little while. But again, then as you go along and the more experience you get more comfortable in that. But to your original question, there definitely is a point at which, though, that I think some people struggle. It's a challenge because you have those people who see, you know, medicine or what we do really as almost a journey. They enjoy the academic pursuit of it. They enjoy the knowledge acquisition, and they like the research and all these various things. And then if they reach a point in their career where they have obtained, I guess, their status, their board certification or whatnot, because that would be another step. You know, you're a full-fledged doctor, so to speak, you're out.
Yeah.
But now you have your board certification to pursue. So that's kind of the next brass ring, as it were, to try to obtain. But past that point, yeah, you may be like, well, what's left? You know, there's just maintaining my license and just practicing. Yeah. And I do think there are people who are very academically driven or motivated, and I think it does become challenging for them. I don't know if burnout's the word, but they're just bored. You know, they're just intelligent enough and they like their pursuit enough that having finished and they're just practicing, they find it kind of mundane. It's just it's the day-to-day, it's the same thing for them, and it's just not a challenge, and they don't feel like they're learning. So I think there is a subset of people in the medical profession that struggle with that, and those people I think sometimes will then maybe go on to try to do an additional subspecialty in their field if it's available. In anesthesia, you have a variety. You could go into critical care medicine, you can pursue pediatrics. There's a specific, you know, cardiothoracic anesthesia you can do. There's interventional pain medicine, which is, you know, the avenue I took. And there's probably a couple of others. But you could do that if that was, you know, you were so inclined to, again, try to keep your mind fresh and try to do something new.
So yeah, as you're saying, I guess it's like there's not really an end. Like I'm assuming by asking that question that there is an end to your education when as a doctor you still have many more things that you could learn and more specialties you could attain.
Yeah, I mean, this sounds a little cheesy to say it, but learning never stops, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, which is a bit ridiculous, but that is true because, again, as I said, you know, things are always changing, you know, so to be current, you always have to be reading journals and keeping up with what's out there and staying abreast of what's going on. But realistically, learning may never stop, but it certainly slows down very dramatically once you finish your training. Your core of knowledge stays with you, and you essentially just update it as you go along.
Absolutely. I mean, I've seen you do all of the Florida trafficking stuff where you had to relearn all of that, even though it was unnecessary.
Well, and some of that, so that's something different altogether too. That's just compliance. So in order to maintain your medical license, there's certain things that you may not even find relevant to what you're doing, but due to state laws, they may require of all providers that they educate or familiarize yourself with certain things. And there's any number of things that they will put in front of you, that you'll have to spend 1 to 2 hours going through educational wise and then taking a test just so you can consider yourself familiar with that material.
So I know that you also, I mean, to be a doctor in the first place, you have to have an incredible sense of work ethic. I mean, there's no getting over it. You have to work incredibly hard to be a doctor. I mean, even the dude that you mentioned who had like a photographic memory, you still have to work hard. And so, I mean, how did you really overcome laziness? Or, I mean, if you even had laziness in the first place?
Yeah, I think that's kind of a self-limiting thing. I think anyone who's not motivated or doesn't have a work ethic or doesn't have a drive, you're not going to see them in med school. They're just going to get deselected very early on because it's highly competitive from the get-go in college. And it's pretty intimidating, as a matter of fact, when you get to college. Just a sheer number of people who say, "Oh, I'm pre-med." And you'll find yourself in an auditorium with 300 people who are all pre-med. And that's one class of many that have an auditorium packed full of people. And you just know statistically, there's no way all these people are going to make it. So it's a bit unnerving to be in these rooms with all these people that are really your competition in a way. I mean, there's room for so many people, but any of these people taking a spot is one less spot for you. So you really kind of see them as your competition. So it creates a little bit of tension, but you'll see that some of those people will realize, they'll feel that tension as well. And they're like, yeah, I don't want it that bad. And they'll drop out, or they won't really apply themselves and their grades will reflect that. And, then a counselor or someone will say, hey, look, if you can't get through your first major biology class without, struggling to get past a C, maybe this isn't for you.
Yeah.
And that would be it. So either you're blessed to be able to handle the material very easily without working very hard and do well. And there's some people who have that, or you realize I'm going to have to just really be disciplined and work hard to be able to get the grades needed to be in the game here. So you still have a spectrum of people and their level of how hard they have to work. But I would say it's going to be the exception to the rule that someone's not having to work really hard to be competitive to get in.
So all I'm hearing is you didn't really, if you had laziness in the first place, you kind of overcame it just by straight up necessity. To get into medical school, you need to work harder or get better.
Again, that's not even something I'd really be worried about too much about overcoming. I mean, anyone who wants to be in medicine by and large is an achiever. There's someone who's driven and motivated. You don't have many people who are lazy. I would call those basically people living in fantasy land. If they don't do well in school and they don't really have curiosity and they don't really have drive, but I want to be a doctor. Man, you're in fantasy land because it's not going to happen. It just won't.
So I've definitely seen some of those people in some of my classes. It's like, you're shooting for the stars, but I don't know if you got the work ethic or really care enough to do it. And so it's super prevalent around me sometimes. But
yeah, and it's, again, it's a fantasy. Anything you want without a plan or the motivation to achieve is fantasy. It just doesn't materialize.
And that concludes the first part of my interview with my dad, where we debate the work-life balance of the question of what a good life is. And as always, thanks for watching.